Hey, what's going on, everybody? Manny here once again. Welcome to DFS Zone, Week 2 of the NFL quarterbacks. Let's talk about it. So, quarterbacks this week. Before I get started with this week's quarterbacks, I have two that I'm going to share with you. And that I have like about 5 or 6 in my player pool that I do like, that I think they're in good spots as well. But we're going to talk about 2 of them, and I really feel good about these 2. But before I get started with the 2, let me just recap. I would like to do a segment of just recapping some of my picks. So last week I gave you 2 picks. I did throw in a couple others that I was watching, like Trevor Lawrence, like Anthony Richardson, and I played some of those guys. Joe Burrow was another one. So I played all those guys. So basically, my lineups consisted of this. I have 40% of my lineups with my quarterback 1 being Justin Herbert. Now, 30% went to Geno, and then the rest of the 30% was scattered around. I had 2 lineups with Trevor Lawrence, 2 lineups with Baker Mayfield, 2 with Anthony Richardson. I think that was it pretty much. Those are the guys that I went with. And Justin, I think overall he put up fair fantasy points. He put up 20.86 FanDuel fantasy points because I play strictly just FanDuel. But his numbers were pretty good. It's just the yardage was not quite there. I didn't hit with my my passing yards with Price Picks as well as Underdog Fantasy. But 23 of 33, which is pretty darn good, over 70% completion percentage. 229 yards passing, 1 touchdown. He did have 5 carries for 17 yards. And like I said, 20.86 fantasy points. I think this week he's going to bounce back, probably put up better numbers this week. We'll see. Geno Smith was the other one, and he was it was probably the worst performance that maybe Geno has ever had since maybe being on part of my beloved New York Jets years ago. Geno had a fantastic year last year. I believe he's going to bounce back. I do believe that Seattle's offense, especially with the weapons he has with Walker, Metcalf, and Lockett, and Fant at the tight end spot, he has enough weapons to be able to do a lot of things offensively. It just was not a great week for him and for this offense. And surprisingly, the Rams, to their credit, the Rams played very well defensively. We all thought, and that was my biggest, research on it, was that the Rams would be a team that they will definitely give up quite a bit of yardage and maybe some points. And it didn't pan out that way. So kudos to the Rams and their coaching staff and them putting up a very good game. And Stafford played very well too offensively. But Geno finished 16 of 26, 112 yards. That is pathetic. 112 yards passing, only 1 TD, and 9.08 FanDuel fantasy points. Holy shit, that is bad. So, I do believe Geno will bounce back a little bit this week. It's going to be tough because they're going up against Detroit. But, and I think Detroit is a much more better defensive team than the Rams are, at least on paper, in my opinion. So it may be a tough task for him, but I do believe that he'll get better than 9 fantasy points this week. So, but that was pretty much it. That's where I went with last week. So this week, man, what I have. So we look at the top here. We got Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. These guys are in play. Obviously, Josh Allen had a tough go against my beloved Jets. Granted, let's go Jets. We did a good job. I feel bad. I feel terrible about the whole situation with Aaron Rodgers. But, what are we to do? That's football, and we just got to move on. But Josh Allen definitely had a rough go. And again, man, to credit to the New York Jets, it's a good, solid defense. They were pretty good last year, top 4, I believe. And then this year, I think they'll be up there in the top 4 or 5 again. And I think it's just going to get better. So when you face good defensive teams, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to try to push the issue. And I think he tried to do a little too much. And we got the best of him. So we do have to play them again one more time in Buffalo. So, we'll see what transpires in the next matchup against the Jets. But I think this week he's in a great matchup. He's going home game. He's going to have a chance to redeem himself, and I think he will. And I think that this is a perfect matchup for him. The Raiders, they're not the greatest defense. They're not a Jet defense. So he should be able to move the ball and put up some points. So I think he's someone you got to consider. But at 9,200 here, I think 2 of the plays that I'm going to talk about, I think that they're, you're in a better position that you could probably get the same amount of fantasy points out of them. Even though Josh has a very high ceiling right now, his floor is the 12 fantasy points that he put up in the week 1 against the Jets. But then again, that was the Jets. Patrick Mahomes, same thing. He went up against Detroit. He's going up against Jacksonville. I really think this is going to be a great matchup. Vegas thinks it's going to be a great matchup. and there's some high team totals here, and there's a high, game total. So again, if he doesn't have Travis Kelce, which I believe he will, I just don't think that his offense is as strong, or at least the players that are surrounding him are not as elite as they were in the past. And I think Jacksonville has the upper hand. I really think, personally, in my opinion, that Jacksonville have more weapons on offense, and it's just a matter of Trevor Lawrence and that offensive line coming together, and they have no injuries going into this game. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Jacksonville win this game in Jacksonville, but we'll wait and see. So you could go Mahomes there. Herbert, like I said, is going to have a bounce back week, but I'm going to talk about Trevor Lawrence. I mean, I like Trevor Lawrence this week at this moment, being, Wednesday the 13th. Trevor Lawrence, last week, as you can see, 241 yards, 2 touchdowns. He put up an 18.7 fantasy points. He had 1 interception. He actually carried the ball 7 times for 21 yards. He did have a fumble, but nonetheless, he played a fairly good game. This week, he's got to go up against the Kansas City Chiefs at home, and this is where we at right now. We have a game total of 50 at the moment for this game. 24.25 for the Jags, 27.25 for implied total for the Kansas City Chiefs. Vegas believes that this is going to be a high-scoring game, and I believe it will be. I like the whole idea of maybe Kansas City getting ahead early on, especially if Travis Kelce is back, and I believe he will. That will put Trevor Lawrence in more offensively to throw the ball a little bit. But looking at the numbers from last year, I mean, first things first, Jacksonville is a tough team at home. Jacksonville was the hottest AFC team the last 7 or 8 weeks of the NFL season last year. They went on a crazy run. I think they won 6 out of their last 7 games or 8 games. They made the playoffs at 9-8. Okay, they just barely made it, but they got in. They won their first. They finished 5-3. These are the numbers. They finished 5-3 at home and 1-0 in the playoffs. They got that one playoff game at home, and what a game it was. It's probably a game that you'll never forget. They were down 27-7, if you remember correctly, at halftime. Came back and won that game 31-30 over the Chargers, which, again, the Chargers defense, they're going to have always good offense. The Chargers always are going to put up big numbers. Look what happened last week with Miami as well. So that's the whole thing. We got a lot of offense, not enough defense. It's going to be tough for you to win the high shootout games. And so that's where I'm at with that as far as last year. So I like the factors that they're at home. I like the factors also that Trevor Lawrence didn't have bad games at all against Kansas City last year. They played 1 game during the regular season. He put up in that game 29 of 40, 259 yards, a 72% completion percentage, 2 TDs. He carried the ball 4 times for 26 yards. Granted, they lost the game 27-17, and at that point in time, that was their last big loss. They fell to 3-7 at that point, and from that point on, they got on a crazy run, and they finished 9-8, made the playoffs, and the rest is history. So the Jaguars are a surprising team. The only thing that lacks on the Jaguars is a little more better defense. But with Doug Peterson being the coach and the offensive-minded, Trevor Lawrence is in good hands. And not only that, he's got a lot of weapons. Granted, he got the 2 young guys in the backfield, ETN. They went in and drafted Tank Bigsby. They got themselves Calvin Ridley in the offseason, signed him to a contract. And then on top of that, they end up still keeping Christian Kirk and they got Zay Jones. These guys are pretty loaded in every aspect of the game offensively, and I think Trevor Lawrence is in a very, very good spot here with this team moving forward. So I like this whole matchup. The second time they played wasn't a divisional playoff game. They lost that game 27-20. Competitive game again, okay? They played well. Finished 24-39, 217 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. 73% completion percentage. And again, if you look at the numbers, he threw 40 passes in game 1 and during the season. Then in the playoff game threw 39. And it still were competitive. That comes to show that the Trevor Lawrence should be in position to be able to throw 35 to as many as 40 passes in this game. And now he has Calvin Ridley. So I just believe that this is just going to be a great spot for him to be able to put up some serious good numbers. Now the Chiefs, coming into this game, little small sample size. They played that 1 game last week against Detroit. They lost that game. But they gave up 368 total yards in that game, 250 in the air, 118 on against the run. And now you got ETN and Tank Bigsby back there, which, and ETN is so explosive. He gets a little open space, he can be gone. It could be a long day for the Kansas City Chiefs. I love the whole matchup, man. Kansas City, last year also, going back, that was a small sample of this year, but last year finished up the year in the middle of the pack. They finished middle of the pack, Kansas City, defensively, but as far as the pass, 221 yards per game to the opposing offenses. Trevor Lawrence in the 2 games, 259 and 217, pretty much an average of 239, 240, and he's in a position here, he just threw 241 in last week's game in 32 passes, 24 of 32. I can see him throwing 35 to at least 40 attempts this week and maybe getting 25 to maybe as many of 28 receptions. It could be a very long game. I like Trevor Lawrence in this matchup. I think that he is an excellent, and like I said before, they got Calvin Ridley now. And Calvin Ridley last week, he had 11 targets, 8 receptions, 101 yards for a TD. Kansas City, I think, is going to have their hands full this weekend. So I love Trevor Lawrence here at 7,800 on FanDuel for this week. Other than Trevor Lawrence, my next guy is also in a good spot because he's going up against a team that he has done well in the past with, but at the same time, he's playing extremely well, and that's Jared Goff. Jared Goff last week, you could see 22 of 35 pass attempts, 253 yards. He threw only 1 touchdown. He got a 14 spot in that game against Kansas City. This week, he's facing Seattle. And Seattle had a rough go, with the Rams. And I do believe that Detroit, defense, is going to be tough for Seattle. All right. And I think this is going to be one of those games. So let's look at the game totals, right? So the game totals right now, it's like the third best in this slate. 49 for this game. Total implied totals for Detroit, 27.25. Okay. That is pretty darn big. They are favored by 5.5 points, and they're playing at home. And Detroit is just the reversal. It's just the same type of whole last year. The way they gained momentum in the middle of the season towards the end, they were one of the hottest teams in the NFC, just like the Jags were in the AFC. They pretty much was just duplicating what the Jaguars did under Coach Campbell. And I tell you, this is a fired up team. They're better defensively. They finished up strong defensively last year. They started off well by winning at home against Kansas City. They're going to go now and play this week against Seattle at home. They're going to be tough. All right. Detroit last year finished at home 7-4. So we know that they're pretty. The only thing is that they did play Seattle 1 game at home last year, and they lost that game. That was one of the 4 losses, was to the Seattle Seahawks. Now, granted, that game was 48-45. I do not expect at all whatsoever with Detroit the way they play now defensively to give up 48 points to Seattle. But you never know. This is why you play the games. You just never know. But just looking at what they have done and what they have built and the momentum they have built defensively since the middle of last year to the end of the year and going into week 1 beating Kansas City. Again, Kansas City was with no Travis Kelce, so that definitely hurt. But nonetheless, you got to still give it to Detroit. So let's look at the game totals for Goff in that game. In that game, he threw 39 passes, completed 26 for 378 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a 73.5% completion percentage for Jared Goff. Okay, this year, that 1 game, as you can see, I already said it, 253 against Kansas City. Small sample size, 1 game, Seattle. Last week gave up 426 yards total in week 1 against the Rams. Second most in the NFL, 334 yards passing and 92 yards rushing. And this week they got to deal with David Montgomery, and the rookie Sims back there, which I think makes Detroit even better. I mean, because David Montgomery looked absolutely wonderful last week in his first game in a Lions uniform. So, again, just the matchup, it just seems just perfect for Goff. Now, again, you can come back on the other end. You can game stack this thing, and you can just throw in a Lockett or a Metcalf in here if you go with Goff and with Brown, or you could just go Geno and then just get one of the Detroit guys. This is a game you can definitely stack. But I mean, again, I just love the matchup. I think this is going to be a great spot for Jared Goff. I think Detroit is going to be in a good position here to possibly go 2-0. And I feel bad for Seattle, but again, Detroit coming in, they're just a much more better team, defensively. And then on top of that, not only did they get Gibbs in the draft, they also got probably the best tight end in the draft too in Laporta. And Laporta is solid. Now it just makes this team even more tougher offensively. Now he has weapons pretty much everywhere. So I like Jared Goff here, man. I think he's a good play. 7,300 against Seattle. Again, this week if you wanted to, just to throw a couple of names out there. I already mentioned Herbert is in a good spot. I already mentioned that Josh Allen is going to be in a position this week at home. He's going to have a bounce back game. Patrick Mahomes could be in the same situation too. And the same could be said about Geno Smith, going up against Detroit. I think he's still going to have a rough go, but Geno Smith, could have a bounce back week this week. The only thing about Geno is that I think in the injury report, he has 2 offensive linemen hurt right now. So if they're not able to play, it's going to hurt Seattle a whole lot this week. Other than that, man, so, that's pretty much it. As far as the guys that I'm looking at, I think those guys are the bounce back guys. I think if you're going to look all the way down here at the bottom, Brock Purdy, obviously, with San Francisco against the Rams is a good spot. Matthew Stafford, I mean, you never know. He's going against San Francisco. I don't think that's a good spot, but you can never fall asleep on Baker Mayfield against Chicago. I think Baker, he's not going to put up 300-yard games, but he could probably give you a reasonable 225, 250 passing and throw a touchdown here and there and maybe even scramble for one. So, I mean, Baker Mayfield could be someone, but I mean, I'm not high on those guys. I think the ones that I'm looking at the most, obviously Anthony Richardson is definitely in play against Houston for me as well. Joe Burrow, bounce back week? I think so. I mean, he's in another spot too, has played fairly well against Baltimore, not really big games against Baltimore, but he has played well enough. He will play better than he played last week. That's for certain. So Joe Burrow, but I'm not going to be poly on Joe. I think that if you're looking at the games right now this week, I would say that Trevor Lawrence and the 2 that I gave you, Goff, are very, very good. And then if you want to, you could come back with the same guys in those games on the other side of the field. You could definitely go with Patrick Mahomes, with Travis Kelce back. Same could be said for, Geno Smith, who would be probably very low owned this week after that horrible game last week. All right, and that's pretty much where I'm at with the quarterbacks for this week, man. So I hope you guys drop a like. Remember also, I don't know if you guys realize, if you do look at the comment section on Sunday, I will definitely give you a couple of quarterbacks that I think could be of value or where they're at on the quarterback video. So where you pin the comment at, I'm going to probably put there, the top quarterbacks that I'm looking at. If it's still Lawrence and if it's still Goff, I will mention those guys, but I also will throw in there anybody else that I think that is in play for that week. And it'll probably be around 12 noon, 12:30 the latest, and that gives anybody time if they want to look at the comment section. Hey, you know what? I'm not too sure where I'm at. Let me just see what Manny has in store here and then take it from there. So again, man, drop a like. Appreciate it. Comment down below. Let me know what you think of this week's quarterbacks. Let me know who you like, who you don't like. And let me know what you think of the 2 selections I have for this week. I will be back with running backs tomorrow. And other than that, subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys on the next one, man. Peace out.